Discovering Your Authentic Leadership. It's a Harvard Business Review article, and it was written by Bill George, Peter Sims, Andrew McLean, and Diana Meyer. And I read this for the first time a couple months ago, and it really hit home. And there were a lot of things that hit home for me. And why I wanted to include it here is because we've talked about the associates, we've talked about the customer, we kind of talked about you. But this is about you. Because I want you to really think about self-reflection. I really want you to think in terms of believing that you have room to grow. And then I really want you to think about the last part of, there are actions, whatever those actions may be, that you can take, whether it's accepting someone's feedback, proactively asking for it, whatever you need to do to become that authentic leader. And there's a lot of pieces that are in here that we'll touch upon. What do you think authentic leadership means to you, or what caught your immediate attention? And you don't even have to leave the first page. I don't even need you. If you read the first paragraph, I'd love to hear what caught your attention.
Being authentic.
Okay.
Just being authentic to the person you're listening to.
Being who you want to be, which is my tagline for my outside interest of Dowd Professional Development and Coaching, is transform into who you really want to be. Because I spent 20 years at work trying to impress all the people around me. And I realized when I finally learned how to be me, and it took Toastmasters got me there, it doesn't necessarily have to get you there, but it allowed me to be a little bit more vulnerable, share my stories, prove to people that I'm not perfect. And it was easy. And you say, wow, people start to listen and relate, and they say, well, I'm not perfect either. Huh. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this. Anything else get your immediate attention?
Personal growth has everything to do with what you professionally grow. Because if you're completely out of balance, it will show up somewhere.
Are you willing to grow? Do you see your growth opportunities, or are you blind to it? But one thing that caught my attention as I was reading through this is 50 years worth of leadership studies and research and books and flavors of the day and all that tell you what a leader is says, oh yeah, by the way, there's no cookie cutter mold to leadership. That should make you feel pretty good. That there's nothing that says in order for you to be an effective manager or a leader, you have to do A, B, and C. It should make you feel pretty good, because now you can say, I am who I am, and now I can grow and do stuff and become a better leader. And I don't have to be put into a cookie cutter. I don't have to be someone I am not. And look back at the times where you potentially were someone you were not. And ask how well that worked out for you. Think about how sustainable is that. And the definition of authentic leadership in this article, and this is a quote, authentic leaders demonstrate a passion for their purpose, practice their values consistently, and lead with their hearts as well as their heads. How many times have we said, oh yeah, that person's really smart, or that person's really emotional, I love their passion and enthusiasm, but there's no balance between it. It's a balance of hitting the hearts and minds, and that is one of those things over time, over the last 20 years or so, that has emerged when it comes to leadership, is this ability to, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show your emotions in the right sort of ways. It's okay to share your stories with other people. It's not that cut and dry, cold business atmosphere that we've heard about from many, many years ago. And it's okay. I mean, every time I say that, I think of Jim Mora, the coach, used to be the coach for the New Orleans Saints, crying in the middle of a football interview. Football players don't, or football coaches don't cry. I just saw a League of Their Own this week. You know, there's no crying in baseball. Doesn't mean everyone needs to grab tissues and start crying. It just means it's okay to share what's going on in the world. So today, we think about, when we discuss that definition, we say, I don't have time to develop that person. I don't have time when they come onto my team to invest in who they are. I need you to develop that person and then hand them over to me. So when you think back of the definition of being passionate and sharing your emotions and being smart about what you want to do to develop that person, get over the fact that they're coming to you and figure out which situation they're in. How confident are they? Are you going to overmanage them? Are you going to undermanage them? Are you going to overlead them? Or are you going to underlead them? But figure out where they are. But know it is your responsibility and no one else's when they are in front of you to work with them. Because we say we don't have time for them. I don't have time. I can't do that. But it's also our responsibility to make the people who work with us emotionally attached to the work that's going on. What value do they place in the job that they're doing? So we'll talk about some examples. Do you have some examples of people who you feel have shown where they're emotionally attached? There's this chapter in the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Dr. Richard Carlson. I read a chapter a day, by the way. And one of the chapters talks about this guy, and they say, what do you do? He said, I'm a bricklayer, and I put brick on top of brick on top of brick. And then they asked the other guy, what do you do? And he said, I build masterpieces. See the difference? Do you have anyone that is there, that feels I live to take care of my customers? And if they don't, that's our opportunity. And on the associate side, if we say, is there someone I'm giving up on right now? Maybe I can turn them. Is there someone saying, maybe they're getting a little bit good. Maybe I don't want them to pass me. I mean, let's get real. Doesn't that happen? I mean, you brought up the point of that fear. Could it get to a point where I develop someone to pass me? If that happens, shame on you for not developing along with that person. Because there's an opportunity for you to grow along with them. It doesn't mean it's always going to be this. But it does mean that you get them into a position to have them lead. Nothing could make you better or more proud than watching that person grow with the company. Because if you're doing that, you're riding the coattails, and I'm hoping you're getting credit for developing that person. And it was interesting because when it was always me, selfish Tom, even though I've managed hundreds of people, there was a time where it was always Tom. What are Tom's numbers, Tom's teams? Tom doesn't even come into the equation now. It's what is that team doing? And I'm just going to ride their coattails because nothing makes me feel better than watching someone get promoted. Nothing makes me feel better than having them move to a different area and succeed and bring along the things that I hope that they maybe took from me.
Especially if they're struggling where they're the wrong fit. I think before we give up on someone or spend years wondering if they're not performing, if it's the wrong fit and we can find something that benefits our property and our company and that lets them feel better. But the chapter says nobody wakes up and says, I don't want to do a good job today. I don't want to really work hard. Some people can say, I don't want to work hard today. If we can find a better fit for them that will directly impact guest satisfaction and our bottom line in some small way and allow an associate to feel better about themselves in their job to use the skills that they have. Either we're underutilizing them or we're putting them in a position that they're justified. That's a huge thing when someone walk out the door.
I was terrible in Little League. I was a bad hitter. In fact, I was so bad you can't even put the word hitter on because I never got a hit in the 7th grade. I led the league in hit by pitch, though. And I knew I had to change. I was in the wrong fit. I turned to lacrosse, and lacrosse ended up being great. And I had some fun doing that. And it's the same type.
Those free walks.
But it's I spent many years at your golf club trying to play golf, and I realized that wasn't for me either, so I dedicated my time to Toastmasters instead, because you guys were taking too many of my balls in the water. And yes, it was your fault. It wasn't the hook or the slice. So let's think about some leaders that are out there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in your company. You can think in terms of bigger picture out in the industry or corporations or wherever, that you think in terms of leaders that exhibit the types of characteristics that you want. The types of characteristics that you know their story, that they came up from the ashes, or you know that they were constantly pushing themselves further, or you know that they had to reframe themselves to get to where they are. They ran into a wall, they decided to go around. So who are some people out there that you think about when we talk about leaders? Alive or dead?
The owner of our company.
Okay.
Is he alive or dead?
He's alive.
I'm just checking.
Very much.
It's a new game. Are they alive or dead? So you mentioned the owner, but why?
Why? Because he came from nothing to build what he has today. And obviously he went through many hurdles to get where he is today and to build the empire that he has today.
And that's one of the characteristics. Now remember, there's no cookie-cutter leadership, but there are certain characteristics that many of these effective leaders or authentic leaders have. And one of them is rising from the ashes, coming from nothing, or having something push them down where they had to come through it. And everybody has a story. And what are you doing to share that story along with it? That's a good example. Good. What else?
I think Tom's success is, guys like Connie, who have been with the company for, 30 years, Con?
25.
25, yeah, I mean, and you look down his resume of properties that he owns, and it's amazing the longevity that he has as a following.
That's great. Anyone else you think about?
FDR.
FDR, okay. And what did FDR have going for him?
For him personally, not a lot. I think that's one reason. And only going for him, but because of what he did in spite of what he had going for him, especially during that time in our history. Pretty amazing.
Abe Lincoln, how many elections did he win? He lost the Senate. He lost everything leading up to that. He never won an election. He said, all right, I'll just become president. You get these stories of him sitting in his log cabin over candlelight, just reading constantly and making himself better and stronger and not accepting it. That's the difference. That's the difference. And you have to think about, he's got a story. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, you have this, you're either love him, or you hate him, or he loved you, or he hated you. But there was never anything in between. But why would you bring him up as why would I bring him up as an authentic leader?
He failed and then he made up and created Apple from Macintosh.
And so he has a vision. He had this vision of this little thing, and he went bigger than anyone would have ever dreamed by starting in the garage. He builds up this huge corporation, and they shoved him out. He reinvents himself, reframes himself, and starts Pixar. Takes over that company and reinvents him, and they say, can you go back, please? Apple. And he was authentic in the sense of, whatever you're putting in front of me is unacceptable. And set the standards a little bit higher. Worked for him. Doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. But he was authentic. You knew what was going on in his head. You knew if he liked you. You knew if he hated you. There was nothing in between. You can't get more authentic than that. Now, there are some opportunities in how he can have been a better leader. But think of the authenticity that came from it. The characteristics in this example, this discussion, is that you're not born to be a leader. So for everyone we say it's impossible for you to be a leader, I'd say no, it's not. You can develop it, you have to have the right goals, you have to have the right purpose. You need to discover what your potential is. Being painfully shy and introverted and putting me up on a stage to speak would not have been my potential years ago, and I would have never thought. I backed into it purely by accident and realized that there was a potential somewhere in, not even close to reaching that potential, but it's something to work for. And so you have these goals. You can't be born with it, but you can develop it, and you can create this vision and this goal and set those goals and mission for yourself to be out there. And none of this is possible without a support system. How many times have we come back to that today? It's about the support system. It is about coming in and making sure that you have people who say, you're doing it, keep going, and you have people that are like, but we can get you there. It goes both ways. And you have to be able to, as an authentic leader, to be willing to give it and be willing to take it. That goes along with it. So let's invest some time right now to jot down your story. What I want you to put down in there is the impacts of any parents, teachers, coaches, mentors, any impacts that they may have had on you. Think about a difficult situation, some adversity that you might have had that got you to where you are today, that drove you. And then write down some examples of how this adversity pushed down. So just jot it down and think in terms of your own story. Because this story can become the foundation that starts to drive you further. Just jot down a couple bullets. It doesn't have to be a narrative. People who inspired you, animals that inspired you. Big blue-eyed brown horse, 1,200 pounds. As we're starting to wrap this piece up, as you're taking notes here, is think back to the managers that inspired you, motivated you, told you things you didn't want to hear, told you things you did want to hear. And I gave you those examples from my performance appraisals, and yes, they were quotes. It took 20 years for this guy, Bob, to say Tom's communication skills are his strength. Bob's no longer with my company. Bob moved on, and Bob and I still talk. And Bob became one of those inspirations of someone I'm still going to keep going to when I need them. So make sure you're thinking bigger picture, not just the people that are in your immediate eyesight, the people that have worked with in the past, people that have inspired you in the past, people that have been all of a sudden popped into your mind today that you haven't thought about for days, months, weeks, years. Find a way to reach out to them. It's part of the power of networking. And reinvent that link back to them, that connection if you need to. Because they obviously inspired you for a reason to pop into your head. Take advantage of the things that you have today. The phone, LinkedIn, Facebook, those types of things. So does anyone want to share those stories? And please don't feel the pressure to. But is there anyone who wants to share?
Funny that Gary mentioned our leader for the company, and he's actually my mentor because I had the opportunity to start my career under his leadership daily. I worked in Bal Harbor at our hotel up the street called the Regency for 6 years, and he would always beat me to work every morning. And he had already walked the property. He already knew the numbers from the night auditor. So we would always review those, and then he would walk the property and show me the things he wanted improved upon, or just constructive criticism. And we'd always end the day together too about what the next night was going to bring. So without question, having that type of person in my life has made a tremendous difference. Some people will be surprised to hear that in my younger years I tended to be a little bit of a troublemaker. The 8th, 9th, 10th especially ages or grades, and I think not knowing the difference between right and wrong during those years has made me a stronger person now. When I see someone that makes mistakes, it's easier to understand and recognize where important. If if you're a leader and you think you're perfect, I'm far from being perfect. And I think because of those poor decisions in my younger years, it's made me a better person when I'm older. Hockey is my passion after hospitality, and coaching kids has inspired me not just to be a better athlete, but because it develops their personality and it builds their confidence. When I'm on the ice, it's not just about seeing whether that kid can skate across the ice. It's about the smile they have when they leave the ice, because they feel like they're a stronger person and they can do it. Some people are hesitant, and it makes a difference, coaching.
In 30 seconds or less, what do you think your reputation is with this group of people?
I think it's probably mixed.
Give him 45. Can we all have 30?
Yeah, I mean, I can leave the room and maybe you can find out, but I would hope that, if someone wants to find out about someone, just ask the people that they surround themselves with. I mean, Vince Lombardi said, champions do not surround themselves with losers. And I would hope that some of the people in this room I adopted from the previous ownership. Some people I hired myself, and I think we have a really strong team. Whenever you have to enforce policy and procedure, you don't always make friends. I think that, today I've learned some things that have brought out weaknesses in myself that I think I can improve upon. And I just hope at the end of the day, everyone in this room knows that I'm there for them. But most importantly, I'm there for the guests. And our guests have really high expectations. So I expect a lot, and my standards are pretty high. And I would hope everyone strives to meet them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that wasn't intended to be a loaded question, although.
No, that's
It was, and I asked it because I know what your reputation is from what I've heard from the conversations I've had with people here. And that reputation is you inherited some people through management change and ownership changes that came about. And you could have given up on those people. You didn't. You have high expectations, but you're also the first person to roll up your sleeve and make sure that the job gets done. Is the reputation that I'm picking up on, the vibes I'm catching from the people that are here. And that comes down to you're still not perfect, but there is authentic leadership in there somewhere. And that's someone to strive towards. And everyone has a story, and you talk about where you were in the 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. I mean, think about where you were in the 8th, 9th, 10th grade. That was my ugly period. 12, 13. But really think about who you were and realize that you broke out of it. Not that you matured, but you broke out of it. And you made yourself better. I could have been on the phones for my whole life and just said that would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I enjoyed that part of my job. And I could have done that for 25 years. But you grow and you develop and you do things that you never thought you would dream of because you push yourself just a little bit further. Authentic leaders push themselves just a little bit further outside of their comfort zone than they like. Whether they want to or not. Or they find a support system that pushes them out for them. So what mistakes do leaders make that take away from that authenticity? When you sit there and say, why are they being like who they are? Well, what are some of the mistakes that they're making?
Poor decisions.
Okay. Poor decisions, quick decisions.
Inconsistencies.
Okay.
Poor judgment.
Judgment. Okay.
Hanging on to negativity.
And what usually drives these non-authentic leaders?
Power.
Okay.
Fear.
Power, fear. And these are not always every non-authentic leader, but
Insecurity.
insecurity. Okay.
Lack of education.
Lack of education. And that's not just the schooling of education, but the willingness to learn comes into play. Absolutely. What else? What are their goals? What is their first goal they probably want?
Themselves.
Something about themselves. So maybe they want a raise, they want a promotion, they want something there, extrinsic.
Look at what I did.
What's that?
Look at what I
what I did.
Self-promotion.
Absolutely.
Title.
So these are what are called extrinsic motivations. And there's a lot of short term that's attached to it. Look at the .com era. I mean, it was boom, get your thing up and running and then start chasing that, and it becomes this fleeting success. Authentic leaders have a sustained success. They have ups and downs. They started down here. But when you start thinking about Tom and what he's done, he hasn't dropped back down here. Again, has it? It's sustained. And when it started to dip, you found ways to bring it back up. I mean, how many times has Donald Trump filed bankruptcy? And you can almost sit there and, I mean, you laugh because you say, is he an authentic leader? Well, he tells you you're fired, you get it. But there's this authenticity behind him. He says, I mean, he causes controversy, but he tells you what's on his mind. There's obviously opportunity that's in there. But there's those that have this sustainability, and you might go for the almighty dollar. You might look for the promotion, but if your primary goal is to get that promotion, if your primary goal is to get that raise, if your primary goal is to get that thing that's up here that says me, it's not going to last long. And I have to, my wife and I have this conversation all the time. She asks, what is your goal with this book? And my goal with this book is to get the message out. And then break even. And then buy a boat. Which brings you back to below even. And she has to ground me. Like, I might have a book signing. I'll say, oh, I didn't sell any books. She's like, did you talk to people? Yeah, I talked to a ton of people. She's like, then you make a goal. She's a very grounding woman, by the way. You have to figure out what your real goals are. Real goals. And those are the intrinsic ones. And the intrinsic ones that are out there is you do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it because there's value to it. You do it because you're touching someone. You're doing it because you're touching the customers. Well, in the right sort of way. You're doing it for these different reasons that have such a lasting influence. That's where authentic leadership comes in. Because if you're chasing, and I did this early in my career, I competed with people for the next job. As part of the National Speakers Association, there's this theme that goes on that says, stop fighting over the piece of the pie and realize that there's a bigger pie. Make the pie bigger. This guy and I they started this brand new department in the bank. And so there were 2 teams. We got them up and running, 15 on each team. And we could have just built a wall between us. We said, we're going to compete against each other. We're going to do whatever we can to do it. And we didn't even share food on food days. And they had a focus group, and we got blasted, both of us. Just blasted. Because we were competing against each other. We both got smacked between the eyes. And we both said, all right, let's fix this. We had food days together. We became the top performing site, no questions asked. The gap was this large. And then we alternated. And we had our fun competing against each other, but we both increased our game, not competed against each other. And we both got promoted. How's that work? A few years later, he comes back to me and asks for my advice on the job. And we talked about, I gave him the advice. He ended up becoming an executive of the company before me. He ends up giving feedback to someone else who gets me that I love. There's a book out there, it's by Adam Grant. It's called Give and Take. He's considered the top under 40-year-old professor in the country. He works he's through Wharton Business School. And his premise is that there are givers, and that there are takers, and then in between there are matchers. And the givers are the ones who give their time and spend and invest and give everything they can for the company. And then there are the takers who take everything, self-promotion, do everything I can to get me here. Who are the people that finish on the bottom of the totem pole? The givers. Who are the givers. Just depends on which role you're in. And does it tie back in, like the doctors are givers? And so they found the right job where they can give and it matches out. So it just depends on the job that you're in right now. But the takers don't last long in being influential. But you talk about giving this time, and if you can give your time or you can give something, and that's what I felt when I was working with this guy, we were giving each other. We stopped taking from each other and started giving to each other, and success came about because of it. And there's an opportunity here to think in terms of give and take and how it relates back to being authentic leaders. Authentic leaders probably give a little bit and have this nice balance between giving and taking direction, giving direction, and all, and being there and leading us through. This is a quote from the article. Values that form the basis for authentic leadership are derived from your beliefs and convictions. Let me repeat that. Values that form the basis for authentic leadership are derived from your beliefs and convictions. What's this mean to you? You guys have your political beliefs? Religious beliefs? Do we all have to agree with them? But it does form the opinion of what comes out of your mouth. It does form who we are, the support system we have, our parents, our upbringing, all of that ties in to what goes on in our head. It makes us who we are. It creates those values. It doesn't make those values right or wrong, it just creates those thoughts and values in our head. So what are you going to do?
You can't separate those intrinsic values that you have outside and inside, or else there'll be so much incongruent about your job and where you're working, who you really are, that will eventually fall apart.
And you can. And we'll actually bring up that question in just a moment. But you can be open to other people's beliefs or allow or be accepting of it that's out there. And it's really interesting because if you sit there and say, oh, I don't believe in that. That's okay. I'm agnostic. I'm just saying, let's just come in and say, okay, I'm agnostic and you believe in this one thing. That doesn't make that person right or wrong. It just means that that's their belief system. So part of understanding that who you are is based off of your values and your upbringing. And being open to the other side of the person you're interacting with also is coming from that direction of, from their upbringing, from their educational background, from who they are considered from their parents. Is going to make that interaction a little bit easier if you're open to it. So how many leaders have you said are fantastic leaders when things are going well? Money's coming in, customers are coming in, we're bringing a lot of people into the hotel, things are going great, and then 2008 happens, and all of a sudden the economy's crashing. You have Acadia National Park where they say we're going to delay some openings. You know, what's that going to have in your business? Bringing people in. What's interesting, that leadership isn't real. When things are going well, it's easy. How many people said the Red Sox were just cruising along a couple of years ago? Ooh, yeah, we're in first place, best record in baseball in August, and didn't make the playoffs in September. What they blame it on? Leadership. And chicken and beer in the nugget. But there was infighting, and then there was this blame, and then people went to the media, and they didn't work it out amongst themselves, and they fired the manager. When things are not going right, it's when the true authentic leaders come out. I went through this leadership program and had to go through these plenty of tests and taking and figure out what your personality is, and said I didn't have one. But it was like sitting down on a couch with your psychologist thing. All right, here we go. And it would say that I was very excited. You know, and Excitable says that everything to me was urgent. It had to be done yesterday. Well, when you start to figure out that that's who you are, and it doesn't mean my goals need to change, it just means how I interacted with it. When these are things that happen at the peak of things going wrong. And think about how you react in the peak of when things are going on, or when you're in your most hectic or pressure-filled seasonality, things coming your way, how do you act? Because that, ladies and gentlemen, is your authentic leading. It's not when things are going right. It's when things are going wrong. Think back to this. So everything was urgent, and then all of a sudden things were going on around me, and it's like, And then I became cautious. And I couldn't make any decisions because I was afraid of making the wrong, or I was afraid of failing. So I've had to work on this piece of saying, it's okay to fail. Am I going to learn from it? Or am I going to kill someone by doing it? I have to ask that question first. Think back to the highest pressure situations you've been under and ask yourself the question, what does your true authentic leadership look like? And those are the pieces, write a couple of those things down and say, those are the things I'm going to start to work on. Because that's what's going to turn your authentic leadership, figuring out who you want to be. Things I'm going to wrap this up with on some of the things to stay grounded as an authentic leader. And one of those is physical exercise. So if you don't exercise, find something that can ground you. But they found that through research, that these authentic leaders, or most effective leaders, have some type of grounding, this support system. Part of it is this exercise. It gets the blood flowing. I went for a run this morning. I feel great. And because the physical leads to the mental, which is part of the authentic leadership. We work 100 hours a week. You've got to find a balance between life and work. In that order. You can't get your life straight, you're not going to get the work straight. And as much as you say, I want to keep it at the door, it doesn't work. The authentic leadership is able to do both. There are going to be times where they need me to stay late, and I will. But if I'm staying late every single day, I'm sacrificing something else. You have to find a balance between the two. Surround yourself with great people, inside and out. And that's family and friends and a support system. Can't go alone. It's impossible. Find a support system. Find some mentors. Reinvent yourself. Find some connections. Old network. New network. Community service. Get yourself involved in the community. I had this thing in my head because of working for a large corporation. We used to do auctions and voluntold what we needed to be doing. And community service was never part of my upbringing. It doesn't mean my parents were wrong. It's just something we didn't grow up with. So it didn't come naturally to me. It comes naturally to my wife. And I've watched her as she's involved in the community and doing these things. But work told me I had to be at this place. I had to donate money here. I had to do this, and it just didn't connect with me. But watching my wife over many years has made it now very important for me to be involved in the community. Not just say, hey, look at our brand. It doesn't hurt the brand. But when you get involved, you start to see some things. When I broke out of the corporate environment because my kids were getting into school and I was meeting parents from school who didn't work at the bank, I didn't realize there were people who worked outside of the bank. Because all my friends and family were the bank. And how my life has changed with incredible friendships that I've made in the community because of community service, of people that I've met because I volunteered to coach a soccer team. Or network with people who, the articles in Penn Bay Pilot, where the book's in there, came about from being part of the Toboggan National Committee, U.S. Nationals Committee, because of those connections that I've had. Not intentional connections of I'm doing this to network. It just happens by accident. It happens, and those accidents are good accidents because you get involved in the community. Know where your roots are. You have to figure out where your roots are. Know where you came from. Doesn't mean it's all going to be perfect. Some people could have come from a silver spoon, but guess what? Know where you came from and where you want to go. And that's part of the map. So I want to end with this quote, and it comes in, and this will just summarize everything, but recognize that leadership is not about success or getting loyal subordinates to follow. Remember I said running through the wall, looking over my shoulder, seeing if people would follow? I remember the day the manager asked me, he said, see that wall? I said, yeah. He said, if you ran through it, would anyone be behind you? Oh, did that hurt? Because I didn't know the answer. I do now. Now I have no one work for me, so it's an easy answer. But the question is, people who don't work for me, do I have an influence over them? Can I influence them? It's important to have leadership at all levels. I know we've talked a lot about how do you build this relationship with your associates and the customers and everything. Have them be happy so they can take care of our customers, but you have to ask the question, do you understand that they are leaders, not just because they are managers or not managers, but do they lead and do you teach them to lead? And understand it's important to have leadership at every level. This isn't a top-down approach of leadership and then that just trickles down. You have to have leaders at every level, and that means develop people to develop people to develop people as you continue throughout the organization. It's extremely important because you can't lead only from the top. It has to be permeated throughout the entire organization. You need to empower others to lead. Give them the chance to say it's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to learn from it. It's okay that you're not perfect, but it's okay to make a decision. They have to understand that it's important for them to make that decision. Because every time they make a decision and you tell them they're wrong, they're going to stop making decisions. And then that's a lot more time on you. It's a lot more pressure on you. For those you need to overlead, take their hands. For those that you can start to let go and cut that cord a little bit, give them their space. But give them the confidence that you can teach them that it's time, it's okay to make decisions, it's okay to be right and wrong. The last quote is, no individual achievement can equal the pleasures of leading a group of people to achieve a worthy goal. When you guys set this thing up, Julie calls me up, throws Connie on the phone, speakerphone's going, and he says, this is what I want to get out of this thing. This is what I want you to get out of today, which are today's goals. The goal was easy. Your goal of taking care of your customer, the last piece here is what can we all do better to take care of our customers and our associates? It has become about the people who come here on their vacations, or the people who come here to use your facilities, that come here because of the reputation of your products. All of you uphold that and can enable it or destroy it. But I think as leaders, you start to understand the pleasures of leading and the value you add to achieve that goal and pull that string all the way